Hello everyone, good evening in Beirut and Palestine time. Tonight, and welcome everyone to this session. So tonight we're gonna talk about platform bias and threats to digital rights for Palestinians and also Palestinian supporters in the region and worldwide actually. Tonight we'll have with us Marwa Fatafta from Access Now and also Ashraf Zaytoun, former head of MENA policy at Facebook. So after what we've been seeing during the recent attack on Gaza, we've seen a lot of during the last 2 weeks actually. Social media has been flooded with disinformation and misinformation, in addition to other incidents like banning, shadow banning, doxing, restrictions against Palestinian content, and also Palestinian narrative. In addition, we've seen a lot of actions by social media platforms like Meta, who has published a statement and mentioned clearly for the first time Hamas that is included in their DIO list, dangerous individuals and organization lists. This list was not published anywhere before. It was just leaked by a website 2 years ago, after the Sheikh Jarrah incidents also and the attack on Gaza in 2021. And now, in addition, we've seen a lot of government actors pushing and driving social media platforms to act against what they so-called Hamas supporters or Hamas posts or anything else related to Hamas. But this is affecting a lot of Palestinian content. It is affecting the other face and also the truth. On the other hand, we've seen a lot of mis and disinformation published and spread widely and globally by the Israeli army and also by other, even Biden and Netanyahu. They shared a lot of things that has been proved to be mis and disinformation. So to discuss all of this, and also in addition to the policies that govern social media platforms, we're gonna have with us tonight, as mentioned before, Marwa Fatafta, MENA policy manager at Access Now, and also Ashraf Zaytoun, former MENA policy head at Facebook before it became Meta. Welcome, Marwa and Ashraf.
شكرا عبد. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I would like to start with Marwa and to ask you about the most recent disinformation campaign. Can you give us some examples about it, and maybe we can talk a bit about the context for this misinformation campaign that has started already?
Of course. I think you're muted, David, but I got your question, and thank you for organizing this this panel at this critical time. I'm happy to be here and to be joined by Ashraf as usual. I think before I delve into your question, I want to preface by highlighting 2 points that are crucial to understand the information ecosystem when it comes to Palestine and Israel. First one of which currently there is a near complete information shutdown or blackout in the Gaza Strip. Since Israel's bombardment campaign has started on the 8th of October, we've seen that the telecommunications lines have been disrupted. And ever since, a lot of ISPs or internet service providers, as well as telecommunications companies, have been bombarded, and therefore a lot of their infrastructure has been either damaged or cannot be repaired. That means that the information that comes out of the Gaza Strip is less than usual. And that means that for journalists in mainstream media, for international organizations, for human rights organizations, it's hard to fact check and also investigate independently allegations of war crimes and crimes against humanity and atrocities happening on the ground. So the information blackout, or the near information blackout in Gaza, is fueling this disinformation campaign that we see happening and circulating online. The second background information that we should keep in mind when we discuss disinformation now is the fact that Palestinians and Palestinian narrative and voices have been always at a disadvantage in comparison to the Israeli narrative. And that we see play out very clearly when it comes to mainstream media coverage. And we've had examples in the past where, or actually, you know, Palestinians are the responsibility of a lot of the atrocities or the war crimes are often obfuscated. So Palestinians die, they're not killed by Israeli authorities, their houses collapse, they're not bombed by Israeli airstrikes, the use of passive voice, and also it's been quite shocking how low some of the journalistic standards have been in carrying out the narratives straight from the Israeli military mouthpieces. And that for me, of course, means that whatever the Israeli government says will probably will be treated almost as facts. There's less verifications of those allegations propagated by Israeli officials and social media accounts. And also by social media companies, we have not seen any action with regards to these official accounts, verified accounts that spread this disinformation. Now, with this ecosystem and this background, now we look at how disinformation shapes and moves around in social media in different spaces. We've seen, for example, content that has misleading captions. We have seen recycled materials from previous conflicts. For example, there was one piece of disinformation showing that Hamas it has arrested senior military officers from the Israeli army, and it turned out to be actually recycled footage from Azerbaijan. We have seen even video games footage being circulated as you know, content showing what's happening on the ground. From the Israeli side, of course, we've seen a high level of fabrications. An Al-Ahli hospital is one strong case in point of how, on the one hand, information blackout makes it hard for journalists and human rights organizations to independently investigate what happened on that night, because again, there's not much information or footage of citizen journalists or just citizens at large uploading content online. And then there is what we've seen how new technologies are helping fabricating some what the Israelis are using as alleged evidence, such as, for example, the fabricated audio conversation intercepted between two Hamas fighters or militants that admit that the bombing was caused by a misfired rocket by Palestinian Islamic Jihad. One final point I want to share on this disinformation we see on social media is the use of AI-generated images. And it's quite interesting here because even for normal users, ordinary users, or even people like myself, it becomes hard to really tell truth from fiction. You know, we've seen this image of the burnt baby circulated by the Israeli official account on Twitter, now known as X, which was retweeted by Prime Minister Netanyahu. And then this American conservative commentator, Ben Shapiro, also shared that content. And then it was called out that this was generated by AI, and people showed us screenshots of an AI tool, an online tool that can detect whether images are real or generated by AI. Now there, interestingly enough, the tool said that most likely this image indeed is generated by AI. Then another photo circulated online, and where instead of the burnt body, there was a puppy. And people and users circulated that image online to say, look, this is the original footage. And it turns out that that footage as well with the puppies has been photoshopped. And these AI tools, they are they're not necessarily accurate, and also they're not transparent into which systems they're using and to what extent they are actually accurate to really confirm with full accuracy whether a piece of content or a piece of footage is generated by AI or not. So that leads us into disinformation, if you may. It becomes harder for all of us, and especially for journalists whose job is to tell the truth, harder and harder, especially in the absence of reliable tools that can show us what is true from fiction. And lastly, we've seen disinformation being circulating on platforms like X, on Meta, and I think the platforms to begin with were not ready to deal with this level of disinformation. And now with this crisis, we see again their inability and their incompetence to tackle such content in real time, especially with the AI-generated content. Back to you, Abid.
Yeah, thank you, Marwa. Talking about social media, I would like to move to Ashraf. So it's not only about like keeping the mis and disinformation circulating on their platforms, but also how their algorithms are letting this piece of content on their platforms. In addition, as like we all know, like as a former MENA policy manager at Facebook, do you think that these platforms are biased against Palestinian content, and what can we do regarding to challenge this bias, for example? So let's start one by one, if you want.
So when we're looking at bias, Abid, I think that the algorithms are biased, and I think it's a different. It goes to different levels between different companies. I can't put all companies in the same bucket. I think a lot of people are now spending most of their time on X because Elon Musk have set like further boundaries for freedom of speech, or what stays on the platform, what doesn't stay. Meta, I would say, and TikTok are the biggest culprits when it comes to that, and for two different reasons. If I take TikTok, the main they're culprits, I think, by design, because they're not a platform designed for news. So they're not news friendly. So you'll see, for example, I know Al Jazeera is facing a lot of issues with TikTok. There's a lot of videos that are being pulled down by Al Jazeera content being pulled down from TikTok. But I think that was by design and less about bias of algorithms. When it comes to Meta, I think it's complete bias. I've said it before, and what's frustrating for all of us is we're repeating the same thing. We're talking about this day after day, year after year, and we're getting the same thing, and yet they audaciously come out with stupid excuses that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. What we have is what I've described. This is a systematic, deliberate, and continuous silencing of Palestinian narrative, and this is what's happening. I think the algorithm, at the end of the day, everyone assumes algorithms are scientific and are correct. But at the end of the day, algorithms are defined by whoever set those algorithms. And a lot of these people have either their own personal biases or they have their own corporate biases, which would then be informed by corporate agendas, pressure, influencing by other companies. So I think we're facing, one of the biggest challenges that the Palestinian narrative is facing and has been facing over the last couple of years is unbelievable bias on so many levels from different companies at different levels and measures towards the narrative. But yet I look at the bright side and I see that despite all of that, I see the Palestinian narrative traveling around the world. I see amazing content creators coming up and fighting these biases, fighting these machines, fighting these algorithms on their own platforms, and pushing forward to get the message across. So I think that's the silver lining that I keep on looking at. But I mean, we've been saying that for the past couple of years and nothing's happening. And I think it's about time that these companies are being held accountable for whatever they're doing, because it's clear, it's evident, there is no doubt whatsoever. And every time it comes, they come to us and they say, this is glitches, technical glitches. Come on, guys, we're not born yesterday. Even if I tell my two young boys about this, they're going to laugh at it. This is one of the biggest companies around the world that has some of the most intelligent brains that exist in the industry. And then they continuously and audaciously come up with this excuse. And why does this excuse happen to Palestinian content? Why doesn't it happen to Ukrainian content? I didn't see any issues or glitches happening to the Ukrainian narrative, which was given unprecedented space on Meta's platform. So again, I think whatever we have is systematic, it's deliberate, and it's institutional. It's not one or two people. I think it's an institutionally ingrained within that organization. And the whole attempt is to reduce the reach of Palestinian narrative across the world.
Yeah, so it's like a deliberate bias. It's not like a glitch, as you mentioned, Ashraf. يعني we've seen like a lot of and it was documented also like since 2021 in the BSR report that Meta was over moderating Palestinian content and under moderating like the Hebrew or the content coming from Israel. And even now Hamli has documented like more than 100,000 posts in Hebrew, or like that includes and that like incites to violence, and also that they are like goes against the Meta's policies, but still exist on the platform, not only Meta but also on X. Marwa, regarding what Ashraf mentioned about Ukraine and the newsworthiness content that was like, and not only with newsworthiness but also the exceptions that Meta has made to Ukrainians to keep posting their contents against Russia and against Russians and against Putin, and we never seen like anything similar in the case of Palestine, and I think we'll never see something like similar. But talking about this case, what do you think that could, I know that Ashraf is talking about fighting and challenging these algorithms and also like trying to overcoming them, but is it our job to keep like fighting them, to keep challenging them, or what could can we do, what can we do to not only keep challenging them but also to make like a strategic and something عن جد to really make sure that these platforms and these algorithms are not biased. If we boycott them, it's a problem. If you don't, it's another problem.
No, I fully understand your frustration because I also feel it. It's really demoralizing to be working on the same issues again and again and again. And as civil society, of course, our job is to document violations of human rights wherever they occur and hold tech companies accountable to their violations of users' human rights. And I thought at some point in 2021, when we as Access Now, SMEX, and a bunch of other partner organizations pressured Meta to conduct a post-mortem investigation into its content moderation policies and actions in 2021, and the BSR report that came out clearly showing a couple of important findings. The first of which was that there are dangerous individuals and organizations policy which bans or prohibits the content that praises, supports, or represents designated groups and individuals is the culprit behind the censorship of Palestinian content. Again, we see this policy, of course, playing out, or the over-enforcement of this policy is resulting in the collateral damage that we see now, and that is, journalists and users' accounts being suspended, shut down, content removed, erroneously under this policy and the algorithms that are used to implement it. The second thing, of course, and it builds on the point that Ashraf made, and that is, of course, the algorithms are biased. And the BSR report says that, well, this bias is not intentional, as in there is no top-down decision or like one decision across the company that says, look, we need to fight Palestinians and Palestinian voices on our platform. But it is intentional in the sense that, first of all, there's a willful act of negligence, whereas civil society organizations have repeatedly escalated cases, repeatedly showed the systematic censorship of Palestinians and their allies on their platforms, and they have decided to keep, to keep a blind eye, or not to invest or put the necessary resources to ensure that, if you want to give them the benefit of the doubt, that such technical glitches or hiccups don't happen again. But the fact that here we are 2 years later, another round of violence escalates even worse than the one before in 2021, and we're facing the same issues, is an indication that these companies do not care about Palestinians' human rights, do not care about Palestinians' right to express themselves, do not care about Palestinian safety against online harassment, incitement to violence, hate speech, and doxing online. I mean, for me, actions speak louder than words. Whatever the companies say, whatever they publish, whatever they tell us in private rooms, public rooms, I judge by the actions. And the actions now are pretty clear. You know, all the reports that we're receiving together with our partners in this space is that, you know, users are being shadow banned, their accounts are being suspended, their content is being removed. And to your question is like, what do we do? What do we do? Because this fight is exhausting. It's all of us are working under capacity, and we have limited resources compared to these companies.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, there were calls for boycotting the platform, which I believe at some point users organically might do that. I mean, up until now, I think companies are underestimating the power of the user and the power of boycotts. And if users, I think users are still sticking to the platform because this is where everybody else is, and this is where the large conversations are happening. And if you're out, you're basically losing. You're losing the narrative. You're not there. You've left it to someone else to shape it on your behalf. But at some point, I think if users take that decision of that's it, this is not a place where we feel safe, where we feel free, where we can express ourselves. If there is another alternative available, another platform, we'll witness the exodus of users. And we've seen that to a certain extent on X, you know, when Musk took over Twitter and gutted the company, and all sorts of harmful content started circulating online, and, you know, activists and human rights defenders as well as journalists been harassed without an end on that platform. So it doesn't feel safe anymore. People have switched to whatever available space there is, whether it be Mastodon or Blue Sky, and things are, you know, are not necessarily working well with the other platforms, but it just gives you an indication that that users would leave as soon as there is an option. As for us, civil society organizations, I think as long as these companies exist, as long as they claim that they are respecting human rights, and we should continue holding them accountable. And I know it's not, it's demoralizing, as I said, I feel it myself. But that is, I believe, our job. And we should also, you know, look into other options beyond public advocacy. And it's up to civil society to think of what other alternatives there are to, or paths of accountability aside from public campaigning. So there are different pathways, and it's a matter of us strategizing. Yeah.
Abid, can I add a couple of points here?
Yes, please.
I just want to build on what Marwa said. What we've seen year over year is a development of their techniques. So if people noticed, and Marwa would know more than me about this. So for this year, shadow banning has been the theme. This is the technique that has been so evident. Most people are talking about throttling of reach, shadow banning. And that's a development when it comes to their technique and how they're dealing with situation. Because shadow banning is a technique that literally they're using. The user is not notified about it. The user is not in violation of community standards. It's a deliberate tactic that the company decides to enforce without informing the user and without triggering any flags or any violation of. So I think that's literally a significant development and extreme abuse of the relationship that the platform has with the users. And I think that's something that every year we're going to see a significant development, that they're going to take it to the next level. And for me, that only shows me one thing: you cannot continue to talk to them. All the talk that they've been talking about, engaging with civil society, listening to what, and I always tell people, I told people that I knew last year, talk to them for how long you want. The guys in the Middle East literally don't have zero authority. My kids at home have more authority than the guys have in the MENA office. The decisions are being taken in the Menlo Park.
The guys working with Meta, you mean, right?
Yes, and the guys in the Menlo Park could care less about the region. They have other things that they're worrying about, and they're keeping focused. And that leads me, and this is something I've been thinking about, honestly, for quite some while. How do you inflict damage? How do you force them to change the rules? And I think it's not easy as we would expect. But again, the answer is out there. At the end of the day, Meta and other companies, Meta specifically, is a for-profit entity, publicly listed. You have institutional investors, you have individual investors there. They care a lot about the performance of the company. How do you hurt the performance of the company? Marwa said it very eloquently. Within the current situation, we cannot ask for a boycott, because the minute you ask a boycott, you're asking people to vacate the space. And when other people come to listen about and learn about the conflict, there is only the Israeli narrative. So that's not something on the table. But again, that could be something that's led by civil society post, inshallah, when things violence ceases, and we get to a safe environment on the ground. I think there's worth a call for a boycott. And it's not, even if it doesn't mean a boycott full time, we need to realize our members, users of Facebook and Meta platforms in the region are more than 250 million. That
250 million? Yeah.
Yes.
Users for Meta and the region. Okay.
Yes. And that accounts for more than 10% of the global population, the global number of users on Meta. Just imagine if half of them decide that for a week or for a month, we're gonna exit Facebook. Impact is immediate. You're gonna have drop in numbers. You're gonna have a drop in in ad revenue. That's gonna make a dent immediately. I hope it could be sustainable. I hope it could be a bigger number. But I mean, Arabs were known for not agreeing on things. I hope the whole situation in Gaza could mobilize a lot of people to really feel guilt and decide that we're going to take an action against a platform that has been silencing us. The second one is ad revenue. People don't realize a majority of the ad revenue on Meta platforms are small and medium businesses. These are not the big companies. These are not your big aviation companies, your big airlines, your big hotels, your big drinks companies. These are small and medium businesses, because you're talking about hundreds of thousands of small and medium businesses that advertise what, $10, $15 per week. So just imagine if you push for a campaign to get these guys to stop spending on Meta for a while. And the last but not least, I think this is what Marwa and the team have been doing for a long while, was media outreach, educating the media, telling them the stories, the news that we get from inside the company. And I think the last option could be something that I'm not a legal expert, but I think worth looking at filing legal cases against Meta in key legal jurisdictions in Europe, maybe.
Yeah. So you're mentioning the whistleblowing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. For example, we could have been known about the DOI list without like a whistleblower. Yeah, that is Frances Hogan. She took the list and then she like published it on the media, and that was like a great step from her. And that's how we learned about the DIO list, right, Marwa? That mentioned like for the first time deliberately that Hamas is under this list. But as like from what we've learned from like our experience with social media platforms, especially Meta, that sometimes they are for-profit companies and they do what their business, like let's say, need between quotation, but also sometimes they do like بصيروا ملكيين أكتر من الملك. They do like a lot more of, for example, the designated terrorist organizations under the US list. So they added their own also. And let me add that files leaked by Frances Hogan, they also mentioned that 80% of the designated terrorist organizations are from our region, from here, worldwide. So this is something like very interesting to keep an eye on. And I would move here also to Marwa to I don't know, to discuss the next step. So I don't know if we agreed that for now we need to be present on these platforms. People they want to be present on these platforms to to share the narrative, to also express themselves, and to also discuss things, to debunk the media disinformation, misinformation, to talk about what's happening in Gaza, to talk about the bombing hospitals and other things. Do you think, and how do you see these strategies are for now, and also after the, inshallah, the bombing ends now later?
Yeah, I mean, one I want to add to the ideas that Ashraf shared. I mean, one thing, and it's really not breaking news, and that is one of the biggest ailments that we've been dealing with regards to social media is the lack of transparency. And here, as Ashraf mentioned, there are a number of reports coming from across the board of users being shadow banned, regardless whether they are journalists with large profiles or individuals with private profiles with a couple of hundred followers. I do believe users, and I believe also my own experience when I see that indeed, when you start sharing about Palestine or pro-Palestinian content, then your outreach and visibility dips significantly. Now, this issue was also a thing back in 2021, but the platforms always denied that they do any shadow banning, and that is that they don't press a button that downranks the content, but we know technically that they're capable of doing so. I mean, content governance is not only, or content moderation is not only about taking down a piece of content or shutting down an account. It's also about the demotion and the promotion of content. And only platforms know what tools are at hand and what algorithms they use that promotes or demotes certain content. So technically, they have that capability to demote and downrank content and reduce its visibility. And I think, to your question, Abed, the next step for us, and maybe we should also look at the oversight board, is to investigate this phenomena of shadow banning. And regardless what platforms use, regardless what Meta, for instance, what term Meta uses, whether it's shadow banning or this glass breaking measure, whatever the actual terminology or the internal term that the company uses, we do want to look at what do platforms do exactly that results in the containment and the reduction of certain content's reach and visibility on their platforms. At this point, I don't think companies have the luxury to deny or to gaslight users that this is not the case, because again, we have been documenting this for a few years now. And it's an insidious form of censorship, as Ashraf alluded to, because the user is not notified and cannot appeal. You're just left to guess based on your judgment whether some action has been taken against your account or your content. So I think we need to really pressure platforms to come out and shed transparency on what exactly they do when they reduce that visibility, and also demand that there is full transparency, as in if a company or a platform takes an action against an account or piece of content that is beyond just restrictions or removal, they need to notify the user. And the second point is here I want to highlight is, again, when platforms, if you look at the context of Palestine at the moment, it's not a normal context. It's a context of a crisis. It's also a context of armed conflict. And so the rules here are different. There are, international humanitarian law is triggered when companies operate in a conflict area, and they have to conduct heightened human rights due diligence to ensure that their actions and policies and services and operations are not are complicit, or companies are not complicit through those actions and products or whatever services in the violation of international humanitarian law. And here, interestingly, if you look at, for example, the statements coming out of Israeli verified official pages on multiple platforms, the call for genocide, the explicit calls for violating and detesting IHL and the Geneva Conventions, the threatening of civilians and the bombing while showing and recording footage of Israeli army bombing hospitals, the use of social media to call on civilians to evacuate their homes, which could be a crime against humanity, to justify the collective punishment that Israel is currently levying on the Gaza Strip. These are all violations, and I'm not a lawyer, but we have been working on research at Access Now that looks at platforms' responsibility when they operate in times of crisis and in context of armed conflict. And I can see a number of huge red flags that we as civil society should definitely bring to surface and investigate and showcase how these platforms might be complicit in aiding and abetting war crimes and crimes against humanity. And they should be held accountable for promoting such content that terrorizes populations and civilians on the ground.
Yeah. Thank you, Marwa. Moving to Ashraf. Ashraf, a question that comes to mind, why these companies are so biased? Why they do this, in your opinion?
Oof. I can speak about Meta. So for Meta, I drew what I call it. I drew an influence matrix of why is Meta biased with Israel. So you have to look at it. I think it's 4 or 5 tiers. One is the size of the Israeli market is much, because it's an export-oriented market when it comes to technology. So the size of ad spending being spent in Israel is 4x the real size of the market. Why? Because they have a lot of global companies like Wix, Waze, and a lot of these companies spend significant money on advertising on Facebook. So the size of the market is much bigger than its real size compared to how many subscribers you have. If I'm not wrong, the ad money being spent in Israel is around 1/3 of the ad money being spent in the whole MENA region, which is quite phenomenal compared to the fact that you have around 250 million users on Facebook. So again, so that's one. So size of market. Second, Israel has an abundance of talent, so engineering talent. So Facebook for the last 15 years has acquired more than 4 companies in Israel. And these acquisitions were talent acquisitions. So you buy the company either for IP or you buy them because of the abundance of talent there. So they acquire these companies, and a lot of these staff, they want to stay in Israel. So they move them to the Facebook, the Meta offices in Tel Aviv. So the Meta offices in Tel Aviv are way bigger than the true size of the market. The second is there are a number of senior executives within the company that are affiliated with the state of Israel, either have Israeli passports or they have an affinity to their cause. So again, that's a third factor. And the fourth factor is Israel managed to build, I think, the most developed matrix of influence on tech companies that exist around the world. I think India comes later, and I think the US on a different level, because the US literally doesn't influence. They're under their legal jurisdiction and they spy on them. So that's completely different ballgame. But with Israel, they introduced jurisdiction. They know who are the right people to influence them within the state. They managed to hire someone for Israel public policy that extremely is, she said in an interview, I'm the ambassador of Israel. She didn't say I'm the ambassador of Facebook to the state of Israel. No, she said I'm the ambassador of Israel to Facebook. So again, you've never, I think this is blatant, it should never have, anyone who has ever worked in public policy, you never say that, because at the end of the day, who pays your salary? The company pays your salary. So the interest of the company should be at the first and foremost, your number one priority. And the last thing is the state of Israel has built this unique matrix of pressure groups that pressure, that pressure Meta and other tech companies whenever all other resources have been exhausted with no results. So they overwhelm the system. They report thousands and thousands of pieces of content, and that's, I'm saying, in good times. I'm not talking about now. Now I'm sure the number has quadrupled or even 5x. They report so much content, they overwhelm the system. Usually when you overwhelm the system, the actions come to your favor, because the system is going to make more mistakes. And usually when the system makes more mistakes, most probably it's going to over-enforce. So if Ashraf said this sentence, the system is overwhelmed, the system or whoever, community operations, the algorithms, they're going to spend literally less than a second trying to assess my post and the assessment, and most probably they're going to over-enforce and remove that post. So when you overwhelm the system, you're going to get more, more enforcement decision in your favor. And that's, I think, what the matrix that Israel has built to get this amazing influence on a lot of the tech companies on different levels, of course.
Yeah, thank you, Ashraf, for putting all of these points together. Actually, they're great points to follow up on with Meta and other tech companies and their market in Israel, and also their influence, the Israeli influence on them. Marwa, يعني, in a human rights point of view, before going to the questions, we have like 2 questions from the audience. From a human rights point of view, why do you think that these platforms are biased? In addition to what Ashraf said, actually, yeah.
I mean, Ashraf gave a very comprehensive action.
Yeah.
For my opinion, why? One, we're not. Well, there's you can look at it from 2 points of view. Actually, 3. You can look at it from a political point of view. These companies, or most of them, are U.S. companies, and so they are going to follow whatever U.S. foreign policy is. Or let's put it this way, that these companies would take political stands whenever it's convenient for them. So it was convenient for Meta to publicly stand in support of Ukrainian self-defense and roll out a number of exceptions, but you will never hear Meta coming in support of Palestinians or their right to self-defense. And that is I don't think because Meta necessarily cares about Ukrainians or genuinely cares about Ukrainians, but it's an easy political position to make that will, of course, has a good reputational rewards for the company to showcase that they are, with the oppressed, that they care about human rights, blah, blah, blah. Then the second point, and also to the political point, it also explains why Meta, for instance, has or adopts the U.S. Treasury and also the list of foreign terrorists, or the list of designated terrorists from State Department. So they're adopting the US's position and definitions and designations of groups. Legally speaking, and that's the second point for me, is that, at the end of the day, yes, these companies are for profit, and they care about not getting in trouble. And not getting in trouble means that they would rather over-moderate and censor Palestinians than be held liable in US for providing material support for designated individuals and groups. And even that has been contested by EFF and other researchers that worked on human rights and terrorist content online. And then the third is, of course, money. And that's the point that Ashraf has detailed quite well, is, we're not we're insignificant, actually, that's the word. We're an insignificant market, at least in Palestine. And, for all these reasons combined, why would the company care? Why would it care about Palestinian voices or Palestinian human rights? If I were them and these were the parameters, I would also, be biased and against Palestinians, because it's more beneficial to be in support of Israeli content, or maybe this is an overstatement, but I would also prioritize other things than preserving Palestinian content and amplifying Palestinian voices online.
Yeah, and that is happening despite their free speech commitment claims, right? So they don't give a shit, actually. We received a few interesting questions actually from the attendees, and I would like to deliver them to you. One of them is maybe is about the topic we're discussing right now. If the platforms are clearly biased, why we as civil society keep engaging with them? Maybe we can answer this more well. So if they are clearly biased, why as a civil society we keep engaging with them? Why we're doing this?
Simple question, not complicated, because that's our job. That's our job. We have to hold them accountable to their claims. And as the digital rights organizations, we have to look at what companies say and what companies do. And you know, even though Meta is a private, it's a private company, it is for profit, it does care about profit over people, but they have obligations and they have responsibilities. You know, under, for example, the UN Guiding Principle on Business and Human Rights. This is where, you know, this is how I see it, that actually, you know, we have to look at what the responsibilities are and what their conduct is, and make sure that those discrepancies are made clear and that the companies are held accountable. And I really hate to admit it, but this is the reality of our time today, is that, yeah, these are the largest civic spaces. These are the largest existing civic spaces online. And until there is an alternative, until, I don't know what the future of the internet will bring, but until there is a liberated, reclaimed internet and civic spaces that we can freely use, we have to ensure that those spaces are available to have people, you know, express their opinions safely and securely and exercise their human rights online. I know this sounds idealistic, but again, and also in the bigger scheme of things, I do also question a lot of things about international law as a Palestinian, but this is the ideal that we aim to, and we aim to have for us and for users around the world, especially for Palestinians as a historically oppressed group that whose voices have been systematically oppressed worldwide.
Unfortunately. Thank you, Marwa, and thank you for all the effort that as civil society like has been doing, like to challenge and also to, as you said, to hold them accountable. Another question is from Mafalda. He says that Mafalda says that she or he is a European citizen, and they have like a strong case of violation of freedom of expression, and they would like to sue the platforms against the Court of Human Rights. She's or he's asking, since there is a lack of transparency, would this be feasible or a weak case? I don't know if anybody has an answer for this.
I think
I'm not a lawyer. Maybe Ashraf knows, but I'm not a lawyer, and I don't work in the context of the EU, so it would be hard for me to point
so I have some background.
Yes, please.
As Marwa said, I think there are cases. But I mean, again, you need this coalition of these civil society organizations to decide that we're going to continue to engage, but then we're going to take the cause of taking 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 cases into the European Court of Human Rights, and we're going to file a case against Meta and other companies. Because at the end of the day, the users, you need someone to do the middle thing. So you have the users, and then you have the European Human Rights Court. You need someone who's saying, I'm going to undertake that role. I'm going to link X, Y, Z from Gaza and take their cases from Palestine or from other Arab countries and file a case against Meta. Even with the slight chance of winning it, that case needs to be, because at the end of the day, these things make an impact. They dent this aura of invincibility that Meta has. And again, it will affect the performance. It will affect the stock price. And I think this is the key target that everyone should be aiming for.
Yeah, so I think everything we do like could make an impact on this bias. Another question for you, Ashraf, is about how hard it is to build a platform that can compete with Meta and which will respect our narrative.
If I had that answer, I would be a billionaire. I'll tell you, the problem is they bought Instagram for $1 billion because they thought Instagram was the Facebook killer. And now the latest valuation for Instagram is around $85 billion. So they've been eating the competitors. The only one that has been able to survive and prosper has been TikTok for a number of reasons. And then they turn the game of this is Chinese technology. It's going to eat us up. It's going to steal all our secrets. It's going to demolish or threaten the morality of Europe, Western teens, as if Facebook's, as if Facebook and Instagram were not doing that. But again, that's the whole thing. Create an enemy so people forget about you. And I think TikTok is the only one that has been doing that so far, but TikTok has its own challenges. The other challenges, a lot of people have been coming to me and telling me we should have an Arab platform. And again, I tell them excuse me, but that's another stupid decision. Because if we have an Arab platform, we're going to be talking to each other. The whole battle is a battle for global narrative. You want to literally influence a global public opinion. You cannot influence a global public opinion when you're on Baz platform and all of the people there are Arabs. It's literally, I'm at my mother's house on Friday and I'm seeing my sisters, my brothers, and my cousins. So literally it's literally, we're going to be talking in silos. The big battle here for you is you want to influence the global opinion on global platforms. An Arab platform won't give you that. It would give you literally, in Arabic, بنسميه حوار الطرشان. We're just talking to each other. So I think that's the challenge. I don't see anyone competing with. Again, let's see. I think what's happening now is helping Twitter on so many levels. I think Threads, which was Meta's latest attempt to try to compete with one of the existing players, was should go into the Guinness Book of Records on the fastest growth and the fastest downfall. And for a lot of people, some people were really amazed. They were saying Threads is going to be amazing. It's going to take Twitter's place. Honestly, shukran لربنا. I'm really grateful that we have X, despite it's literally 1,001 mistakes and faults. But just imagine if you had only Threads compared to X, because literally it's the same beast. People keep forgetting Threads. It's a new company. No, it's a Meta company.
Yeah. At the end, also, Kaman, we're getting more questions. I will go through them quickly. One is about also the role of oversight board, and can the oversight board be positive? Can they play a positive role in their mandate? And if they are framed in a controlled way by Meta, what do you think more about this?
I mean, certainly, and they played a very important role back in 2021 when they took on the case from this user that shared Al Jazeera that had content reporting Hamas and was erroneously removed. And then, of course, the board had asked Meta to conduct an independent investigation into its actions. So that pressure, of course, resulted in Meta finally committing the due diligence combined with public campaigning from civil society. I think for the board now, and maybe for users to submit reports about this shadow banning, I think this would be the most important piece of transparency that is needed, and to have basically force Meta to bring to light what exactly they have been done, aside from the couple of posts that they shared that this is a result of a technical bug, which at this point is not, of course, believable. So I think it would be great if the oversight board looks into this issue of so-called shadow banning, and bring to light what the actions of the company was that resulted in people's content being hidden and not seen.
Yeah, thank you, Marwa. Another Salaha, we're getting the attendees are now more engaged and asking more questions. Another important questions, I think, is about how do you see the future threats in our narrative with AI and data centers in Israel? So we know that there are a lot of data centers based in Israel, cloud centers also, in addition to the AI. How could we act them? And what are the threats in our narrative? Maybe a question for you both.
I'm happy to jump in. I mean, okay, so we're a bit mixing cards here because the data center that Amazon and Google are helping to build in Israel is a cloud center for the Israeli government. and to what extent that would violate Palestinians' rights. Of course, it will help the Israeli authorities expand their technologies to surveil Palestinians. But in terms of freedom of expression, or how would that interact with platforms and speech online, I don't see any direct links between, let's say, data that is recycled, restored in Israel and people's speech online. But of course, it will entrench the Israelis' surveillance capabilities and to tech capabilities to further oppress Palestinians. But I wouldn't say that there's a direct impact on social media companies. This is, of course, to say that, I mean, one would say, and here we need transparency on which companies would use the cloud region. As far as I know, it is for the Israeli government. It's not for enterprise to enterprise type of cloud region, as in, it's not for companies to just help build a stronger presence and faster support or faster services to users in the region. But yeah, I don't see any direct link between the two cases.
And about AI?
I mean, AI in the sense of AI deployed by companies or AI in general. I mean, we're already seeing how AI has fueled disinformation online. And as I shared early on, it will make it harder and harder for Palestinians or for journalists or even neutral actors, if such a thing exists, to dissect and to also flag information, like truthful information from disinformation. So the AI, and we've already seen, like I've seen these screenshots of prompts being asked on Bard or on ChatGPT about what they think about Palestinians' right to freedom. They ask, pose the same question for Palestinians, and then the algorithm spits out this answer that is a complicated answer. And then when you ask about Israelis, then there is this unwavering and unconditional recognition that Israelis have the right to freedom and self-determination. And of course, it's not surprising because, as the old adage goes, garbage in and garbage out, bias in, bias out. And to the point we already shared, these systems are built by human beings. They're fed data that are created by human beings, and they will reflect whatever biases exist. And if anything is so stark and raw and hurtful, I would say, as a Palestinian, is how discriminatory world opinions are, journalistic reporting has been towards the Palestinian people. So it's not surprising that AI will just recycle and reproduce these discriminations and biases we see in a lot of fields, not only in journalistic field, but beyond.
Thank you, Marwa. Ashraf, would you like to add anything on what Marwa said?
Honestly, she covered it very well. I don't have any additional opinions on that.
Yeah, actually, we still have like a couple of questions. Some are about how building how does it sound to, or is it hard to build a platform of human rights activists or civil society activists worldwide under the supervision of the UN? I don't know, but yeah, I think, what do you think about this? So a platform that is under the supervision of the UN for civil society experts or activists.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't the UN and its bureaucracy to come near any civic spaces. I mean, this being said, the UN has been trying, at least in this case, UNESCO has been trying to produce a global blueprint for online content and platform regulation, which is a really terrible idea. Because it assumes that everyone lives in a democracy and there's rule of law and there's checks and balances and separation of power, and that governments can be entrusted in regulating content online, which of course, if in our region governments are only interested in muzzling people's voices and suppress any criticism of their policies or any calls for human rights and democracies. So but I see the value in the question in the sense that, you know, what other spaces can we create that are not for profit? And to be honest, I don't know. I don't know which entity, a global entity, that can create a space where people's rights are respected, and what would the sustainable model to make such a thing run, you know? These things do cost money. So is it based on donation? Is it based on governments? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Governments sponsoring this, which is really a bad idea. But yeah, no, I mean, I don't see this as a realistic option, unfortunately.
Yeah, thank you, Marwa. Maybe the last question, and actually for Ashraf, is about like every time like we challenge these platforms, they finding ways to deflect pressure we build on them. How do you see us in the longer run, and how can we gain any leverage of them? And I think they're talking about, you know, the platforms are keeping like deflecting these challenges, and let's move on. What do you think? And another question like that is relevant to this, is it expected that Meta's restrictions will continue in the future also? So we're talking here about two different questions, but they're still relevant. Over to you, Ashraf.
Yes, it's difficult. It's David against Goliath. This is a company that has a market cap of $800 billion. It's not Ashraf or Marwa or a million activists or 10 million activists. This is what I call it's a long battle. I don't think on so many levels it's a very long battle. It's if you ever need to make an impact, it has to hurt them. It has in order for your voice to be heard, in order for they need to be heard. And as we said, how do you hurt this Goliath? Maybe it's small scissor cuts here, small knife cuts here and there. Sorry, by the way, for the violent use of these things, but I mean, I watch a lot of war movies. So how do you impact them? You need to have small incisions that hurt left, right, and center. There is nothing that you can do that could send the blow to Meta and send what I call the stock down significantly. It's not going to happen. It's a long battle at the end of the day, and it's a reflection of the battle for what I call independence of the Palestinians. This didn't happen over a year or two. It's already 75 years, and it's going to continue. So the whole idea, this is another fight for justice. But you're talking here about a fight for digital justice, because again, whatever you're seeing on real life, it's becoming even worse on the virtual life, where people, what I call it, are being fought and their digital rights are being infringed on. If the metaverse even developed, would they allow a Palestine in the metaverse? Would Palestinians have the same rights on a metaverse? So again, it's all these questions. There is no easy answer. I wish I had an easy answer. But I mean, again, it's you need to be stubborn. You need to be consistent. You need to be, what I call it, in Arabic we say sabr ayyub. You need to be very patient. It's a very long battle. You need, as much as people are fighting on the ground for their rights, a lot of us has the responsibility, and the onus is on us, is to fight for their digital rights. Because I think the fear that I keep telling people, this is not pertaining to the Palestinians. Just this happened in Myanmar. This happened in Ethiopia. This happened on so multiple fronts. These are companies that are literally they are the lawyer and the prosecution and the judge at the same time. So how can these existing legal systems give them this much power? And we've all read about what's happening with regulation of AI and all these things. These companies have become so powerful over the last 3 years that, for a lot of people who are not aware of it, the tech companies have spent 3x more money on lobbying than the oil and gas companies have done in Washington, D.C. Just imagine, they're now the biggest lobbyers the biggest spenders on lobbying around the world. So that's the reality. It's not, I don't want to sound pessimistic. I see a lot of silver lining, but I mean, I keep telling people it's not going to happen in a day or two. You need to be persistent. You need to continuously fight them on so many fronts. And it's not just one person. It's literally thousands who are fighting on multiple fronts and trying to get their message across.
Yeah. Thank you, Ashraf and Marwa and Ashraf. Yeah, our session comes to an end, and I would like to, before we close, if you want to add anything else, thank you again for the very valuable input and for answering the questions, my questions, also the attendees' questions. And now I leave it to you if you want to add, if you'd like to add anything else before we close. Yes, Marwa.
I mean, just quickly on Ashraf's last point, I think solidarity is really, really important. And, you know, thinking about how we tackle this piece, not only as Palestinians, but as global majority, because all of us have been trashed by these companies and our rights have been violated endlessly by these companies. So we need to think about how we can engineer, how we can use all of the violations, the documentation of those violations to our aid. And that is not just, you know, Palestine versus Meta or other companies, social media companies at large, but it is an issue of global majority of versus a handful of US-based companies. And it's, you know, it's a fight for justice and digital rights, pretty much like everything else, where it's an extractive industry, and it is also, for as much as I hate using the word colonialism in these contexts, but you know, we see the same reflections of extraction, of exploitation, of disregard for human life and human rights. And we need to build those connections. And I know this is, you know, there has been a lot of work and connections made between Palestinians and the Kashmiris, Myanmar, Ethiopia, and some of us who work in international organizations with different teams that work on these, you know, with regional teams working on those issues respectively, can see those, see the systematic violations happening and be able to make a solid case that it would be hard for the companies to fight or resist or even deny. But I really I'm grateful for Ashraf for raising that very important point.
Yeah, thank you, Marwa. Ashraf.
Nothing from my side, honestly. It's the last point I would say is just for everyone, if you face an issue, just reach out. There's a lot of people doing amazing work like Marwa, a lot of organizations who are just out there to help people. And I think it's just about educating people. Whenever you're facing issues, there are people out there to either document, and there are people who are out there to just help you. So we're always available to help in every way possible, because at the end of the day, this is not something that's unfortunate. It's not gonna be solved today or tomorrow. That's I hate to be that pessimistic.
Can I quickly jump in and say, yes, please do escalate cases to us. I think, I don't know, Abed, if you can share
yeah, we
our
also
email
have
accounts, but
yeah, for sure. I will share with them. Yeah, Access Now's help desk and also Smax's help desk. Many of us have help desk to help users to escalate their cases, and also to help them like to appeal. And like last but not least, let me you remind me of something, Marwa. You remind me of Genian York's book when she talk about surveillance capitalism. So, and as she put it, let's يعني, and you are invited to read her book also, that يعني explains a lot of what has been raised tonight. Thank you, Marwa. Thank you, Ashraf, and please. And also, I mean, I would like to say that this session will be is recorded, and we're gonna publish it with Arabic subtitles. So for everyone who's asking, thank you everyone for watching us, and have a safe night.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Smax.
Thank you, Abed. Thanks, Ashraf.
Bye. Bye.